Hi guys, my name is Shane Cuthbert. Welcome back to another lesson. Let's get straight into it. We've learnt a lot so far. We've come a long way. We're, in the last few lessons now, and really counting down to, really start making that change. So for some of you, some of those changes and some of those, sort of puzzle pieces would have already started falling into place. For others, you might want to just take all of this in, and just give it some time. You might want to go back through it, rewatch some of the videos. Obviously, we'll catch up at some stage, which will be really good, and we can touch base and share your thoughts. I'd like to know what your experiences are and what you're thinking. We might just need that little extra push or that little extra bit of communication to make it happen. So let's get stuck into the next lesson. So no matter where you're at in your journey of change, inevitably at some point you're going to have to face some of those fears and some of those vulnerable feelings, and you're going to be met with, that overwhelm. And we talked a lot about that in the last few lessons. But moving forward, I think what's really, really important is, having the ability to be able to shrink down, that overwhelm. Sometimes we might not actually particularly feel, completely overwhelmed. So in the case of, if you look at procrastination, where you get these sort of thoughts in your mind that, really just excuses that, help you keep putting something off. In that example, when you're procrastinating about something, you're not really feeling overwhelmed, okay? You're not feeling super stressed about it. You're not feeling anxious, but you sort of still do a little bit. If you acknowledge those feelings behind those thoughts, why are you making those excuses? Why are you putting those things off? Okay, it's because you've still got that feeling, okay, that sort of, that vulnerable sort of scared feeling. It's just not as overwhelming. Okay? The real key when you are feeling particularly overwhelmed is being able to take those sort of problems and those tasks and just break them down into bite-sized pieces, okay? It's about zooming out, being able to see it for what it is, and just break it down into more sort of achievable, smaller goals, okay? If you've got some big thing that you want to achieve, reward the steps, break it down, make it smaller. It's just going to make it that much easier for you to overcome and work through. Let's go back to that example of being on the bridge, okay? So you've come up to that bridge, you're doing, as I said, a walk, and you've found this bridge, and you've got to cross this bridge to continue, obviously, to the other side. So we talked about how you would have these overwhelming, feelings, okay? And they really set in when you're at the top of that bridge, okay? So you go up some stairs, and you're just about to step on and take that very first step towards walking to the end of the bridge, okay, when all these sort of overwhelming feelings start coming into play. This is the exact moment when you have to learn how to start communicating with yourself differently, okay? This is that exact moment when you have to really separate those feelings, from the reality of the situation, separating the reals from the feels. It's not just about what you say to yourself in those moments, okay? It's also about having the ability to listen. So it's about being able to listen to those feelings, and listen to those thoughts. So think about having a conversation with your inner child, okay? That part of you that's deep down inside. What kinds of things would that inner child be saying to you in those moments, okay? In this moment when you're about to really, quite literally face, your fear. When you have the ability to listen and really listen to that inner voice, you're gonna hear things like, your inner child is going to say, hey, look, thanks for listening. I'm just really scared. Your inner child saying, please don't make me do this. I'm terrified of this. Now, what you realize is that part of you has wanted to be heard for, a very, very long time. That part of you has been, trying to be heard all the time. And that's where you've had those feelings, is because that inner child and that inner parent, have been going backwards and forwards. And then what happens then is you get those feelings of overwhelm, you get those feelings of tension, something pulling you this way or pushing you that way. and it's all just happening unconsciously, and you're not aware of it. On the surface, you think, oh, I'm having these overwhelming feelings and thoughts, but what is behind those thoughts and those feelings, okay? Behind those thoughts and feelings is deep down inside, is your inner child is trying to tell you that, it's scared to do this thing that you're about to do. The difficulty is in responding back to your inner child, okay? What particularly do you say that is not dismissing that inner child's feelings? So you can't say, oh, look, that's it's unfair that you feel that way. You're not allowed to feel that way, okay? So you can't dismiss those feelings, but also at the same time, you can't, be completely overwhelmed and walk away from the situation, okay? You've got to cross this bridge. So what do you say where you can sort of be in the middle, okay? So where you can achieve outcomes. You've got to soothe your inner child, but you've also got to get something done that, terrifies your inner child. So what do you do in that particular situation, that scenario? It's almost like a negotiation process, okay? When you're talking to your inner child. If you can picture that, you're standing on the bridge, there's your inner child. What you want to say to that inner child is you just want to say, okay, listen, look, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a few steps. It doesn't matter if we get to the end of the bridge or not. We're just going to take a few steps. We're just going to focus on that. If that's all you can do and that's, far too overwhelming, then that's fine. That's okay. We can turn around at any point and we can go back home. But you're asking your inner child to just give it a go. Just give it a crack. So you're acknowledging that it's scary, but you're also not walking away. Okay, you're not giving up when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're saying, okay, listen, let's just take it easy. Let's take it slow. Let's take a couple of steps and let's just work through, those feelings and those thoughts. And let's just see if we can do that together. Your inner child's going to say, if we take a few steps and we don't get to the end of the bridge, we decide to turn around, you're going to take that as a failure. That inner parent's going to start, really having a go at me. It's going to start yelling at me. It's going to tell me, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm silly, and that's not going to make me feel very good. If I stay right here, at least that way, I'm not going to get blamed for failure. The thing is, what that inner child is saying, is 100% true. That's the way that we treat ourselves all the time. We now can be conscious of it, but we beat ourselves up all the time. Whenever there's something that we're doing that, our inner parent doesn't agree with, or it's not on our inner child's list of cans, and we get that tension, we really beat ourselves up about it. So many people contact me, all the time about anxiety, okay? They have terrifying anxiety. One person in particular is, scared to leave the house, okay? They've had some traumatic experiences happen in their past, in their neighborhood. It's a pretty dodgy area. And it just really fascinated me because I thought, for someone to not be able to leave the house, and this person was beating themselves up about it to me, they were saying quite openly, I know that I'm stupid. I know that, I shouldn't do this. I know it's bringing everybody down. I've got to go out, my mum expects me to go out. I need to care for my brother. And they were really blaming themselves, to me. And I thought, if they're blaming themselves openly, to me in discussion, what are they doing, on the inside? They must really be beating themselves up about it. And that really just makes it even more scarier. I mean, that's where anxiety comes from. It compounds. It makes it worse. You start off a little bit anxious. You start telling yourself some negative things, so you get more anxious. You really start building that task or that thing that you want to do up in your mind to be, something completely worse than it is. And then you get to the point where you're completely overwhelmed, which is really like an anxiety attack, okay? You can't move. You don't know what to do. You can't go anywhere. Sometimes you can't articulate what's going on. You can't ask for help. Really, the state of overwhelm is really just an example of anxiety. And anxiety is really just an example of overwhelm. So this is what you say to your inner child, okay? You end up turning around, you go, okay, yep, fair enough. I do blame you, I have blamed you in the past. So what we're gonna do is every step that we take, we're going to count them, and every step that we take is going to be progress. If we take no steps, we don't make any progress at all. If we take just some steps, then that is some progress. What you're doing is you're conditioning your inner child, you're conditioning yourself, you're creating an environment and a situation where you're rewarding the steps, okay? So if you go home after taking, a few steps, at least you can go home knowing that you have at least made some progress, you have at least, taken some steps. And this time, the response from your inner child is going to be a little less resistant. It's going to be a little bit more positive. So imagine you start taking a couple of steps, okay? It starts getting a little bit wobbly and your inner child saying, whoa, okay, that's it, that's enough, that's enough for today. Now you can sense that the overwhelm is pretty strong here, okay? This time what you've done is you've gone to, the absolute end, the absolute edge of your comfort zone, right? You have come this far, so you say to your inner child, let's just take one more step, okay? Let's just take one step out of the comfort zone. That's it, okay? We'll just take one step and we'll go home. We're done. You tell your inner child that you've come this far. One extra step isn't going to hurt. It's just one step. So that's what you do. You take one more step, one more step outside of the comfort zone, and then you stop. You turn around, you grab your inner child, okay? You turn around, you start making your way home. But as you are, making your way home and as you are walking away from that situation, you're just mindful to check in with that inner child. You look at your inner child and you can see that your inner child's thinking, okay, look, it's not so overwhelming now that we've walked off the bridge. So you say, okay, how about we do it again? Let's turn around, let's give it another crack. This time we'll just take that extra step, or we'll see if we can make a little bit more progress. And each time you do this, it just gets easier. Now, you're not trying to, completely overwhelm your inner child and just go to the other side and power through it. You're actually acknowledging that this is a process. It's going to take time and you're rewarding yourself. Because you're doing that, your inner child's starting to feel a little bit differently towards it. It's starting to feel a little bit more open. It's starting to realize, okay, I took that step. It's really uncomfortable out here outside my comfort zone, but then straight away it's relieved to know that, okay, it was just one step now we're going back. So, you wait till you calm down a little bit more and then you go, okay, let's go have another crack. This time, we know that we've come, this far on the previous occasion. Let's just do it with an extra step. Each time you go back to the bridge, it just seems just that extra little bit more easier because you've already done it before. So all you're really doing is just taking that extra step. It's one step at a time. You're really just rewarding the process and the steps. Quite literally, you are rewarding the steps, on this particular goal. It's making that stretch outside of your comfort zone to take that one extra step that's really making all the difference, okay? It's really helping you grow. We grow when we stretch ourselves. Eventually you get to the point where you're able to cross all the way over to the other end of the bridge. You're able to go back and forwards a couple times, and then, eventually that fear that was once, really, really, really strong within you just goes away. It just fades away. You become used to, walking over this particular bridge, and that sort of communication with yourself becomes a habit. So the next time, you feel that fear setting in, you just do the same thing. You've now already learnt that process, and then all you've got to do is practice it. So, with each additional bridge or, each step or whatever it is, in future, a tall building or whatever it is that's giving you that feeling of overwhelm in regards to your fear of heights in the future, you're now equipped with the tools you need to overcome them. You now know the process. All you've got to do is practice it and it'll become a habit. And you won't get so stuck next time. The problem is that when something goes wrong or something's hard, we blow that problem up to be, way bigger than it is. The bridge is higher than it is. It's further than it is. We blow things up, to be almost the size of the world. They're huge. These problems just become gigantic in our minds. And when problems are that big, you can't overcome them. It doesn't matter how confident you are. So the skill is in not overcoming huge, gigantic problems, but being able to see that they aren't actually always huge, gigantic problems. They are just as they are. Here's something that's quite handy. This could be actually a really good tool for you, is when you come up with your goals or this problem that you want to overcome, okay, and you spend a bit of time thinking about that and you want to break it down and, be mindful now moving forward that, and be conscious that, you are making progress, how about ticking each little piece of progress off? You need to set a rule for yourself, okay, a new rule for yourself moving forward, where every amount of progress, no matter how great or how small, you at least acknowledge that progress, okay? You tick the box. What you're doing is you're teaching yourself to count every little bit of progress that you make, no matter what it is, okay? You might have some setbacks, you might have some times there where you step back, but you're really then going to be able to look at this list and visualize how far you have come, and you're going to be able to, see it. It's going to become real. It's not just something that's in your mind anymore. It's a physical chart or piece of paper or timetable or whatever it is, where you start to see slowly over time the accumulation of all these ticks and all of these net gains we talked about. The benefit to this is that when you're able to zoom out and see the bigger picture, it's going to become a lot easier to shrink those, problems down when you've got all of this evidence to back up the fact that you have been making progress and you have been working towards that goal. Okay, you've now got, real evidence and real proof to show that you've really been doing well and you've really been making progress towards that thing that you want to achieve. Fine-tuning that awareness of all of the steps and all of your goals, along the way, that's going to be a really magical thing for you moving forward. The ability to do that is going to mean so much to you. So I encourage you, if you've got to write it down, really, really reward yourself, and you may think that it's stupid. You might be in the workplace and you've got this chart sort of set up, and your boss or your colleagues might think, oh, that's really dumb. What's that? You come into work today. Well, that's stupid. Why is that progress? You picked up the phone, you sent some emails, you did this, you did that. At the end of the day, you go home, at the end of the week, you get a paycheck. It might be silly to some people, but, being able to do that, if that's going to help you moving forward, then it's not silly, it's not stupid at all. So you've really just got to, overcome that and that sort of adversity to it and really, take it for what it is and accept it. And if that's something that's going to help you, then it's a fabulous tool moving forward. It's something that you can always refer back to, and know that, okay, you did that thing, you took that step, you aren't at ground zero anymore. That's what really overwhelms us when we're trying to change is, we might be 6 months into it, a year into it. And we look back, this is why a lot of people fail at university or they drop out. They do a year or two, towards a 4, 5, 6 year degree, and they just think, I can't see the finish line. To be honest with you, I just cannot see the finish line. It's taking so long, I'm struggling, there's no reward. But when you can see that, well, you've already, done these subjects, you've already attended these classes, you've already done these assignments, you've already, you're already a year into it, you're already 2 years into it. You only have a year or two left. When you really break that down and see it for what it is, you're just going to be a lot more better off. Yeah, you haven't completed it, okay? The glass isn't full. But you're not at the starting line either. The glass isn't empty. You are where you are at. So see it for what it is. See where you're at and acknowledge where you're at. So in the last lesson, we talked about the ability to be able to zoom out, okay, and see things for what they are, and then to be able to zoom back in and tell yourself that it's okay. So imagine that you have the ability to zoom out and see yourself with, this list of all these things that you've achieved and what you've accomplished. When you zoom back in and you talk to yourself, the question you want to be asking yourself is, what's the next step? The trick here is being able to break those steps down and make them so small that the next step is always just, so easy. It's not going to overwhelm you. And that's going to be different. The size of the steps is going to be different for different people. But really, the best advice I can give you is break all of those steps down into just these tiny microscopic pieces. Let's say, for example, you want to study. What's a tiny, tiny step that is, really, really easy for you to achieve today? Get online, look at what you want to study, Google some places, Google some universities or educational, community services where you can learn that thing that you want to learn. Get some information. That's so easy. You can pick up your phone, you can get on the computer, you can do that. It takes you about half an hour and you've just completed one step. What's the next step? Send an email, make a telephone call. Hey, I'm interested in doing this. When's the next term? When's the next semester start? How much does it cost? Get some information. It's just a phone call. It's just an email. How easy is that? Wow, you've just completed 2 steps towards, your education. And yeah, you might have some people that think, oh, well, that's silly, that's stupid. But where are they? What are they doing? If this is necessary for you, then do it. If this is what it takes for you to achieve your goals, then do it. It's just a phone call. It's just an email. Just some time on your phone or your computer, doing some research. It's really that simple. The best advice I can give you is break those goals down into just the most microscopic, tiniest steps, because you're going to meet less resistance each time you do it. And then at some point you'll be able to look back and see that you've done all of these steps, okay? And that's going to motivate you to keep going and inspire you to keep going. And when you have those tough days where, those steps are just a little bit, you are feeling that little bit of resistance or the steps are a little bit bigger, you're going to be able to look back and say, well, I've come this far, do you know what I mean? You've already taken that many steps and it's going to feel easier for you. Just like walking on the bridge, taking that little step outside of your comfort zone again and again and again with repetition forms a habit. So then you are more better able to, in the future, step outside of your comfort zone more frequently and get things done, achieve those goals, become the person you have come here wanting to be. When we set a goal for change that we don't already feel confident with, it's inevitable that our mind will view it as too far a stretch, especially when we're low on energy and motivation. This overwhelms the inner child, which becomes resistant, often manifesting as avoidance and procrastination. The key here is to form a bond of trust with your inner child so that he or she begins to accept your lead, making it easier to keep moving forward.